It's an absolute honor to be here with Paul. He's served as a true inspiration to me. Actually, we first started corresponding while he was in prison, and I've been in this field now for about 12 years, but that would have been, I'm trying to think, maybe 96, 97, around the time we started corresponding. He would write me these 12-page long letters, just with the most incredible level of detail. And then 3 weeks later, I'd get this letter from him. So, what did you think? And with follow-up ideas about these stories that he wanted me to pursue. And I thought, my God in heaven, this man is brilliant. And he is. He's absolutely brilliant. He has what seems like a photographic memory. Anytime I want to contact him about any case, or rather any story that I'm pursuing, he's able to cite case law and precedent, and this man's brilliant. So it's absolutely an honor to be in this book. I was in the last one as well, Prison Nation. And as he mentioned, in this book, I had worked on an undercover assignment, which ended up being a cover story in these times, and it was about going to Phoenix to the American Correctional Association's conference. So I'm going to read a little bit from that, just a short little segment, and then I'm going to transition into my book, Women Behind Bars, which came out a few months ago, and kind of put the human face on all of these numbers and all of these statistics and the business of making profit off of human misery, and give you an idea of what that looks and feels like for women from Hawaii who are sent to Maine. So this is on the inside with the American Correctional Association. I went, would have been in January 2005, and it was about 85 degrees there. Absolutely just mind-boggling how hot it was. But I'm going to skip over all that. This conference's theme was Corrections Contributions to a Safer World, and the conference program didn't try to hide the gathering's militaristic bent. The cover of the 201-page ACA booklet featured a soldier with an enormous phallic tank gun superimposed over the blue planet Earth. And ACA's 3 keynote speakers were prominent conservatives or military officers: retired General Anthony Zinni, Michael Durant, the pilot of Black Hawk Down fame, that's what we were trying to figure out earlier, yes, and disgraced Homeland Security nominee Bernard Carrick, who would later plead guilty to corruption charges associated with his tenure as chief of the New York City jail system. The conference was financially supported by private prison giants such as the Corrections Corporation of America, CCA, the GEO Group, which is formerly known as Wackenhut, Correctional Services Corporation, and Correctional Medical Services. The titles of the dozens of overlapping workshops indicated what ACA defined as the latest trends in corrections: faith-based juvenile programming, anti-terrorism in correctional facilities, and, my favorite, can't simply paint it pink and call it a girls' program. One workshop, Intensive Medical Management, how to handle prisoners who self-mutilate, slime, starve, spit, and scratch, featured footage of a nonviolent paranoid schizophrenic prisoner in Utah, forcibly extracted from a cell and then tied down to a restraint chair. After being strapped down naked for 16 hours, the prisoner died. The session was facilitated by Todd Wilcox, the medical director of the Salt Lake County Metro Jail, who used the imagery as an example of how to avoid costly litigation. Don't get personal with this, Wilcox said. It's just business. He reminded the audience how important it is to sever the emotional leash that guards and nurses can form with prisoners. He also referred to some mentally ill prisoners with access to disorders as, quote, the people we affectionately call assholes. So if that gives you an idea, that's actually pretty light imagery compared to some of the stuff that I saw. Some of the folks who were involved in setting up Abu Ghraib, especially the civilian side, were actually former correctional authorities or administrators here in this country, and so many of the tactics that they employed there were actually things that they tried out here first, including hooding, and people are nodding, so you would have some idea. One of the things that was most disturbing for me, and that I had to take a few days to just recover from, was a slide shot of a man who had slashed himself all across his chest with a razor. He was bleeding profusely, and the man who was giving the presentation said, well, we all know what this is, to the correctional authorities and guards and so on. This guy's just trying to get our attention. We know what this is. And there's just laughter. You know what this is. This is nothing serious, right? So this is the level, this is the callous on which these kinds of things are happening. bathroom deals and lots of handshaking and lots of wine flowing. And it was a surreal experience, to say the least. Actually, the second day into it, my hotel room was broken into, which I've never had happen before. So it was pretty serious business. Let me segue to my book, which I'm very, very proud of having written. I'm finally at the point where I can say that. This book took about 2 years. I traversed the country, going to federal institutions, state prisons, county jails, juvenile detention facilities. I went to the world's largest women's prison complex, which is in Central California, as well as the nation's largest federal prison complex, which is in Coleman, Florida. And I went to 3 international prisons. I went to one in my native country in Finland, the country's only women's prison, as well as to Holloway, which is the EU's biggest women's prison, that's in London, and Alouette, which is a provincial prison outside of BC, up in Canada. So take a look at how our neighbors were dealing with, or other Western nations were dealing with these very similar issues. Now, women across the board who are incarcerated tend to present almost identical sort of facets or histories, with rare exception. And the most common things are sexual abuse, physical trauma, domestic violence. 1/3 of women coming into the criminal justice system are homeless. When they come in, of course, they're disproportionately poor. Most of the women actually in this country who are incarcerated are still Euro-American, although demographically there's a disproportionate representation of black women and Latinas in prisons compared with their population out in the free world, as they like to call it. I don't actually like to call it but prisoners do. No, we're not so free. So with that said, I really set out to explore some of these common themes and to document women's lives. I am very well versed in the academic work around these issues. I'm a statistics geek. Give me statistics and I'll sit there happily for 6-7 hours with a cup of coffee or several. But what I wanted to do here was to tell the stories of the women themselves, the voices that we don't hear. And these are hard voices to hear in many cases. And actually, I got this question today, so I have to address this. Somebody said, I was talking online about my book, and they said, well, how did you suss out who was really innocent and who wasn't? Everybody must be contacting you saying, I'm innocent, I'm innocent, I'm innocent. And in fact, I could count on one hand how many women contacted me to say I'm innocent. In fact, if anything, women were even admitting to crimes they hadn't committed. Women's sense of shame around what they had done, or their sense of being on the margins of society was so acute that very few of them would say, look, I'm innocent. And if they did, they would back it up with stacks and stacks of court files and talk to this person, and actually pursuing some of those cases. So these aren't women saying I've never done anything wrong. Sometimes they've been sentenced very severely for relatively minor crimes, but these aren't women saying, I'm innocent, get me out of here. So these women who I'm talking about in this chapter are Hawaiian women, primarily indigenous, native Hawaiian women and Asian Pacific Islander women. And they are absolutely 90% of them in for Crystal Matthews. ICE is the most common form there in Hawaii. And something like 85% of them are mothers. And this has to do with a contract that Hawaii now has with private prison operator, particularly CCA, but a few others as well, and what's happened to the women and their kids as a result. So it's shipping women's bodies. It is an 18-hour round trip for us to visit my sister. I am nearly 70, and my husband is 72. There is no one else in the family close enough or physically able to make the trip to Florida. We live in South Carolina, and the rest of the family is in Virginia. And I kick off with that quote also to let people know that this isn't just a Hawaiian issue. This is Jane Young, who is the sister of an FCC Coleman inmate, Suzanne Thomas, who's suffering from severe chronic pain, multiple injuries, hepatitis B and C. Pat Brady's quote, she's coordinator of the Community Alliance on Prisons in Honolulu. She says, our women have been moved around